The great Arizona election contest goes to the judge. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is another declaration of truth from your host, Terry A. Hurlman. The trial in the Arizona election contest, Lake versus Hobbs, Richter et al., concluded with another full day of testimony yesterday, and now the judge has the case, and its outcome will depend entirely on his imagination. Specifically, can this judge imagine the kind of deliberate malfeasance by election officials with a view to skewing the outcome? Judge Peter Thompson asked governor candidate Kari Lake to prove precisely that. He probably never imagined that she would be able to prove it. But prove it she did. And no reasonable observer can assess this trial in any other way. I'm going to give you the key points in the trial and illustrate with moments in which some experts outdid themselves and others embarrassed themselves. Before I begin, I do want to shout out to the prime sponsor of this channel, which is Conservative News and Views. Link in the description. Be sure to check out the awesome CNAV Store. Scroll down near the bottom of that link. Lots of great merchandise there, especially this t-shirt that I have chosen for today, which quotes Aldous Huxley saying, "Facts do not cease to exist because they are ignored." This is for you, Judge Peter Thompson of the Superior Court of the State of Arizona in and for the County of Maricopa. You asked for facts, and Kari Lake's attorneys and witnesses gave them to you. One more thing. If you like what you're about to hear, you can like this video. You can also click the bell icon to get a notice every time I come out with a new one. In fact, do you see the little icon, the heart shape with the US dollar sign in it? That's the super thanks icon. If you really want to keep these videos coming, click that and leave me a tip. Any currency will do, so long as it's legal tender. Now, as you all know, the trial began 2 days ago. On 2 out of 10 counts, Kari Lake raised in her complaint, and I have that same link in the description to that complaint. Judge Thompson limited her to 2 issues on whether or not, 1, scanning and tabulation of ballots failed in about 60% of precincts, almost all of them Republican precincts, and 2, whether election officers broke or never established the chain of custody of ballots from the precincts to central counting facilities. Furthermore, she would have to establish that these failures not only could have, but in fact did, skew the outcome. Judge Thompson could have had only one motive to set those conditions, which the law of Arizona does not require, and that is that Kari Lake prayed that the court award her the election outright as first prize. Extraordinary prayers, like extraordinary truth claims, require extraordinary evidence. Now, why do I think she did that? Maybe she wanted to pray for the highest possible remedy the court could grant. If you don't ask, the court won't grant. Or perhaps she realized that redoing the election would see Katie Hobbs become governor anyway. Arizona does not elect a lieutenant governor, and in case of the removal of the governor from office, or of his death, resignation, or non-existence, the Secretary of State becomes governor. And who is the Secretary of State? Katie Hobbs. In any case, Kari Lake asked that the court either A, declare her the winner outright, or failing that, B, hold another election with a special master to run it, and in any case, C, disallow any defendant whom she named in her complaint from any role in that second election. After a hearing on a motion to dismiss and the inspection by Lake's expert of 3 50-ballot random samples, the trial began. Wednesday's session revealed 2 key facts. First, ballots at 132 precincts, or voting centers as they call them, were actually 19-inch ballot images printed on 20-inch long ballot stock. And this happened at the precinct, because in Arizona, a precinct has not only scanner tabulators, but also ballot on demand printers. Now, why, you ask? Didn't I mention that yesterday? Because I never imagined it. That's why, because I never heard of this concept. And I'll have more to say about that later on. Someone having security access deliberately programmed those printers to print 19-inch ballot images. This, although those same printers had 20-inch ballot stock loaded into them. Now, I did tell you that I am an experienced officer of election. Excuse me for a minute. And I have never worked an election in which printers print ballots on demand. Rather, the precinct chief picks up pre-wrapped reams of pre-printed ballots for voters to mark. We know how many we get. The chief and his officers must count all ballots issued, scanned, and spoiled. And spoiling a ballot is like voiding a check, and we do that for much the same reason. After polls close, the chief must ensure that 1. Ballots issued plus ballots unused equal ballots supplied, and 2. Ballots scanned plus ballots spoiled equal ballots issued. Then the chief must return unused ballots, counted, to unit election headquarters. When you print ballots on demand, you invite fraud, because the precinct chief must at best rely on the printer to count and report ballots printed. I recall no testimony on whether precinct chiefs in Maricopa County count unused ballot stock, which brings up the second revelation. Maricopa County had no chain of custody at all for ballots. They did not even count ballots at the precincts before shipping them back to headquarters. The Phoenix affiliate of Fox Broadcasting covered that trial again for a total of 7 hours. I have links in the description to 2 videos of about 3.5 hours each. And they're going onto the end screen. Testimony focused mainly on the debacle for voters on Election Day. One expert testified that long lines began to develop, stretching for 150 voters because the scanner tabulators weren't working. But in fact, they did work, as designed, in rejecting 20-inch ballots printed with 19-inch images. The alignment marks, those are those rectangles that if you ever took a standardized test on an answer sheet, came with the instruction to make no marks or smudges near them. Well, the rectangles didn't align. Result? Rejection. Frustrated or lackadaisical officers of election were telling voters to slip their ballots into slots that did not go through the scanner. Voters were reluctant to do this, and they expressed fear that officials would not bother to count their ballots. I have a link in the description to a tweet embedding video taken at one of those precincts, showing just such an interaction as I just described. Maricopa County officials simply could not explain these failures. Worst of all, one official had to admit that they have known about the printers being able to print a ballot image on the wrong stock in 3 prior elections. He said his colleagues were performing root cause analysis on the problem, and they never told voters ahead of time. Director Scott Jarrett tried to say that voters had other options, but Lake's lawyers wanted to know whether he would say that the printer and scanner issues disrupted the election, and he refused to say. Jarrett also had to admit that the printer's programming was in error. I have links in the description to 2 tweets containing video snippets of Jarrett's testimony. Not very inspiring, I can assure you. In fact, I'm going to quote from a verbatim transcript of Jarrett under cross-examination by Kari Lake's attorney, Kurt Olson. Question: is it your testimony that the printer set changes that led to the so-called shrink-to-fit issue? Was that done on Election Day? Answer: that's correct. Did you hear me? That's correct, he said. Let that sink in. Lake's lawyers brought in a gentleman named Baris, an expert in polling who has seen many elections. He gave his opinion that the failures on election day were systemic, not random. Not only that, he said the disruptions were so severe that they likely did change the outcome. And that was exactly what the judge tasked Lake to prove. To show this, Baris pointed out that voters who agreed to take part in his exit poll had a far lower response rate if they tried to vote on election day. They did not take part because they tried to vote and could not. Baris further testified that wait time estimates by Maricopa County and the Arizona Secretary of State were vastly understated, which in turn complicated the Lake campaign's efforts to tell voters where to go to find the shortest lines. I have links in the description to a total of 4 tweets, 3 showing Rich Baris' testimony, and 1 showing screen caps of wait time displays that the Lake campaign relied upon, to their regret. Defense experts made light of the long lines and the monumental inconvenience. Before I get into how 2 of them made abject fools of themselves, I want to shout out to a sponsor who can really help you through the economic storms to come. That sponsor is oursilverlines.com. Do you feel like you're working harder for your money just to get by? You are not alone. The fluctuating economy, employment issues, and unexpected changes in life have left many families struggling over the past few years. Collecting gold and silver can help shield you against many of these challenges. But if you're like me many years ago, you don't know where or how to start. Our Silver Lines helps by connecting you with thousands of members who are learning the secrets to creating and protecting true wealth by collecting precious metals. And whether you just want to collect rare and unique coins or take advantage of the business opportunities this company provides, either way, they can help you learn to live an exceptional life. Visit oursilverlines.com to learn how you can build a legacy for your future. Now, as I said, the defense experts tried to make light of the long lines. And we're talking about people who are taking off from work. And don't say the solution is to declare elections a national holiday. We never had to do that before, and we don't have to do it this time. Arizona also has more than its share of retirees, particularly people with respiratory problems. That dry air that gives Arizona its name is perfect for them. But you expect them to navigate the chaos and pandemonium that this so-called shrink the fit issue is creating? Give me a break. Or rather, give those elderly voters a break. Nevertheless, this so-called expert, a man named Kenneth Mayer, that's M-A-Y-E-R as in Oscar, tried to claim that there was no evidence that voters gave up in disgust or that even this printer and tabulator issue stopped large numbers of them from voting. But that expert then had to admit he wasn't even on the scene. In fact, he wasn't even in court. He testified, I kid you not, by internet teleconference link. He never inspected any signatures or verification. He has no cybernetic experience and no way to verify independently what Maricopa County told him to say. Now, what kind of expert just parrots what somebody says? How does testimony like that even get into court? But that's not the punchline. The punchline is that this so-called expert was no expert at all, but an opinionated, out-of-state college professor with no background on the subject at hand. I have links in the description to 5 tweets featuring him or commentary about him. Nor did Lake's attorneys neglect the chain of custody fiasco. I have a link in the description to video of them humiliating Reynaldo Valenzuela, the director of elections for mail-in voting. He tried to pretend that a chain of custody existed, but could not. And so I come to the closing arguments. Attorney Kurt Olson, speaking for Kari Lake, summed up succinctly what happened in Maricopa County was wrong. I have a link in the description to a little capsule summary of his argument. But Maricopa County Attorney Tom Liddy, sheesh! He said that the errors by Maricopa County election supervisors, precinct chiefs, and on down the line were compounded by the advice Republicans gave their voters to turn out on election day and not for early voting. Do you know what he called it? Political malpractice. In other words, yes, Maricopa County fouled up, but if voters had voted early, they wouldn't have had this problem. Don't just take my word for that. I have a link in the description to his saying just that. Now look here. The last time I checked, elections have always been about election day, not election week or month or quarter. The United States Postal Service tells people to mail early in the day and use zip code. County election directors have no business telling voters that. Worse, he blamed Republicans for telling voters for months to turn out on election day. But if officials knew this was happening, why didn't they prepare? When you have to plead your own monumental incompetence to avoid a charge of malfeasance, well, if this case were before a jury and I was on that jury, I'd be marking that down as prima facie evidence of malfeasance. And Liddy then said worse. He called on the judge to stop people from contesting every election, as he said. That's the second link I have in the description under his name. The most stunning thing he said was, and I quote, "We believe in choosing our own rulers." Rulers! Whiskey Tango Foxtrot does he think he is? And Whiskey Tango Foxtrot does he think he's talking to or about? He also decried the filing of election contests as sour grapes. Newsflash, the law provides for it. Kari Lake had 5 days to contest the election, and she did, with 4 days to spare, as I understand it. And it ill befits counsel for the defense to say that someone claiming to be the victim of a criminal act should just count herself lucky to be alive. In rebuttal, Kurt Olson returned to the issues at trial. He also highlighted, or maybe that should be lowlighted, Scott Jarrett reversing himself from one day to the next. Best of all, Olson cited a Wisconsin Supreme Court opinion in a case involving drop boxes, a favorite option Maricopa County offered, that elections conducted in a manner contrary to law are inherently untrustworthy. I have a link in the description to a full 15 minutes of his rebuttal on Rumble, because Twitter has such a limited capacity for embedded video. And now I shall analyze this case. I am not a lawyer, though I am an officer of election with 6 years' experience in various jurisdictions. The chief flaw is in the process. Ballot on-demand printing at the precinct was and is a setup for fraud, even if you grant the premise of electronic scanner tabulators. And, though this is an argument for another day, I most emphatically do not. You cannot grant the premise of on-site printing. We have seen where that can lead. Deliberate reprogramming to print a ballot image on wrong size stock. Even without that, we've heard no testimony that anyone either A, ran the tape on those printers to determine how many ballots they printed, or B, counted the ballot stock upon loading and unloading. But the wrong size stock and the shrink to fit issue are devastating. This election has a margin of victory of 17,177 votes. The wrong stock issue alone could easily account for that margin. Add 300,000 ballots with no chain of custody, and you have, at minimum, an election you cannot call. But since the wrong stock failures happen nearly always in Republican precincts, now you can call it for the Republican. County Attorney Liddy's argument seems to be, "You lost, fool, and if you had voted early, you would have avoided this problem. That's what drop boxes are for." Oh, what a great idea. Submit your ballots in a manner in which you cannot know that officials will count them. And as the videos show, you saw scanned and unscanned ballots co-mingled, which is the exact spiteful and illegal stunt those voters were afraid people would pull. And now we're talking about a conspiracy that even includes officers of election at precinct level. Oh boy, when I tell my precinct chief friend about this, I predict he will have a fit. And last, this is for you, Judge Thompson. Pretend, if you will, that I am offering this as a friend of the court. You, Your Honor, will have to decide whether Arizona will ever again have a free and fair election. What are you going to do when the time comes to render a verdict? Did you know what you were asking when you asked Kari Lake's legal team to prove actual fraud? Did you imagine that she would be able to prove it and to make such a devastating and unmistakable showing? For that matter, could Your Honor or anyone else imagine that the defendants would be so stupid and obvious? It was as if they were never even going to hide what they did. Stop Kari Lake at all costs and hope the judge dismisses the case. That's what officials must have calculated. And to add insult to injury, and that word injury has a special meaning in the law, a government attorney speaks of the ability to choose rulers. This is my argument, Your Honor. The court has to decide a case that Your Honor likely never imagined. You left few clues as to how you will rule. True, you told Katie Hobbs' attorney to stop advocating at the first scheduling session when she complained that a long drawn-out hearing or trial would interfere with her planning for Katie Hobbs' inauguration. But Your Honor also sent Kari Lake a burden of proof that was not only beyond the law, but one that you must have thought Lake could never carry. In my humble and admittedly layman's opinion, she did carry it. But Tom Liddy, at closing, clearly asked Your Honor to nullify Lake's case. Stop these endless election contests, he said in effect, like John Roberts telling his colleagues not to take up the case of Texas versus Pennsylvania in 2021. John Roberts had his chance to strike a blow for the rule of law. He blew it. I ask Your Honor not to blow it, as Roberts did. What really has to stop, I submit, is conduct by election officials to the clear prejudice of voters' trust. And that is what Your Honor has an opportunity to stop. Link in the description of the article to Kari Lake's complaint, to the 2 videos with the 7 hours of trial footage, to the footage of the voter reluctant to put his ballot into the infamous slot 3, to the testimonies of Scott Jarrett, Rich Baris, Kenneth Mayer, and Reynaldo Valenzuela, to the closing arguments of Kurt Olson, Tom Liddy, and Kurt Olson in rebuttal, to my Declarations of Truth Twitter account, and to Conservative News and Views. I've also left links to the awesome CNAV Store and to our silverlights.com, as I also mentioned. You know already about how to like a video, turn on notifications, and leave a tip. On the end screen, I'm going to leave a subscribe link to my channel and links to the video I did yesterday about day 1 of the trial and the 2 videos from Fox 10 Phoenix of day 2. This is Terry A. Hurlbut delivering another declaration of truth and reminding you to let the truth set you free.